Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I never questioned his age. Why would I? He told me he was just a few years older, and it made sense. He looked youthful, had energy, and always seemed to fit right in with my friends. I never suspected a thing. But after the wedding, something felt off. It wasn't one big thing, just small moments that didn't add up. The way he avoided certain topics, the hesitation in his voice when talking about his past. Then one day, I found something that shattered everything. It was an old ID card, tucked away in a drawer, hidden beneath piles of papers. I wasn't snooping. I was organizing our new home. But when I saw his full name and birth date, my hands started shaking. My mind raced, refusing to believe what I was seeing. He wasn't just a little older than me. He was decades older than he had claimed. My heart pounded. Had this been a mistake? Maybe it was someone else's? But deep down, I already knew the truth. He had been lying to me. I stared at that ID, my fingers tracing the embossed numbers. He wasn't in his late 30s like he always said. He was in his 50s. A cold wave of realization hit me. Our entire relationship was built on a lie. Every conversation, every memory, every moment we had shared now felt tainted. How could he deceive me like this? My stomach turned as I remembered all the times he brushed off questions about his past. He had been hiding this for years, and I had fallen for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed beside him, listening to his steady breathing, feeling like I was next to a stranger. How could I have missed this? Was I blinded by love? Or had he been so skilled at deception that I never stood a chance? I thought about our wedding, the vows we exchanged, the promises we made. Had they meant anything to him? I had to confront him. I needed answers. But most of all, I needed to know, was I married to a complete lie? The next morning, I waited for the right moment. My heart pounded as I held up the ID. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He looked at it, and for a second, I saw pure panic in his eyes. Then he laughed, a nervous, forced chuckle. "Oh, that's an old card. A mistake." But I wasn't stupid. "A mistake," I repeated. "This says you're 15 years older than you told me. Is that a mistake too?" His face paled. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He tried to deny it at first, saying he'd been embarrassed about his age. But I saw through his flimsy excuse. "Embarrassed?" I echoed, my voice shaking. "You built an entire relationship on a lie." He looked down, guilt written all over his face. I could tell he was regretting his choices, but how could I believe him now? He had lied for so long. What else had he kept from me? I needed answers, the truth, but a part of me wasn't sure I could handle it. He told me that in his past relationships, the women had all left him when they found out the truth. The fear of rejection had driven him to lie. I sat in stunned silence, taking in his words. I wanted to comfort him, but how could I? He had manipulated me in the same way. His deception wasn't just about age. It was about control, about shaping a version of himself that I could love, even if it wasn't who he really was. My trust in him was shattered, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. The conversation continued, but I felt a growing distance between us. He apologized over and over again, promising it would never happen again. But the damage was done. How could I be sure of anything he said? How could I look at him the same way knowing that every word, every story, might have been a lie? I thought about all the good times we had shared. Were they real, or was it just another act? I wanted to believe in him again, but the truth was so hard to swallow. As the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It wasn't just the age difference that bothered me. It was the fact that I had trusted him, loved him, and built a life with someone who had so easily deceived me. I started to question everything. Had I been in love with him, or just the idea of him? Had I ever truly known him at all? I wasn't sure if I was angry or heartbroken, maybe a mix of both, but I couldn't stop thinking about how he had twisted our entire relationship. I spent hours thinking about what to do next. I loved him, but could I forgive him? Was our marriage even real if it was based on lies? I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. Each time I looked at him, I saw the man who had lied to me, not the person I thought I knew. And yet, a part of me still wanted to believe in the man I had married. Could I rebuild the trust? Could I ever see him as my husband again, without that bitter taste of deceit lingering? I spent days grappling with my emotions. I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest every time I saw him. It was as if the person I had married was no longer the same. I questioned my own judgment. Was I too blinded by love? too naive to see what was right in front of me. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stare at him, wondering if I would ever look at him the same way again. The truth had cracked everything wide open. He tried to explain his actions over and over, telling me how much he regretted lying to me. But I felt nothing but distance. His words didn't feel sincere anymore. They felt like excuses. I didn't know how to respond, didn't know if I even wanted to hear his apologies. In my heart, I knew that this was more than just about age. It was about deception and control. He had been crafting a story that he wanted me to believe, but now, it felt like a house of cards, ready to fall apart. I kept thinking about his past relationships. If they had all ended the same way, what did that say about him? How many people had been hurt by his lies before me? And if he could lie about something as fundamental as his age, what else had he lied about? I asked him point-blank if there was anything else I needed to know. He paused, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "No," he said quietly. But the hesitation in his voice told me there was more to the story. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not because of the age difference, but because of the fact that he thought he could get away with hiding the truth from me. How could he be so selfish? How could he think he could manipulate me into accepting a lie so big? I tried to imagine my life without him. Could I really go on living with someone who had deceived me? My mind screamed no, but my heart still ached for him. I was torn, unsure of which path to take. The decision weighed on me. I loved him, but how could I live a life built on dishonesty? Was I willing to overlook his lies for the sake of the love we shared? I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to find a way to justify his actions. But every time I did, it only made me more uncertain. How long had he been hiding his real self from me? How many other truths had he buried, waiting to be uncovered? I couldn't ignore the fear that I would never truly know the man I married. I couldn't stop the constant swirl of thoughts in my mind. Each moment we shared seemed tainted by the lies he'd told. I tried to focus on the good times, the laughter we'd shared, the love we'd built, but the truth loomed like a shadow over everything. I wondered if I had ever truly seen him for who he was, or if I had been seeing the version of him he wanted me to believe. Could love survive this kind of betrayal? I wasn't sure anymore. Every time I looked at him, I felt a tug of confusion. A part of me still loved him, the man I married, the one I thought I knew. But the other part of me felt a deep sense of betrayal. I was haunted by the question, what else was he hiding? If he could lie about his age, what else had he fabricated? My mind raced, but I couldn't find the answers. All I could do was sit there, staring at the man who had become a stranger to me, wondering if our marriage was ever real. I started distancing myself from him, needing space to think. Every time we spoke, the air was thick with tension. He tried to reach out, to comfort me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond the way I used to. I felt lost. The life we had built felt like a house of cards, fragile and precarious. I wondered if I was holding on to something that was no longer real. It was like I had fallen in love with an illusion, and now, that illusion was crumbling before my eyes. One night, after a long silence between us, he asked me if I could forgive him. His voice was soft, full of hope, but I couldn't answer right away. Forgiveness wasn't something I could just give away. It was something that had to be earned. And in that moment, I realized that I didn't even know if I could forgive him. Not because of his age, but because of the way he had deceived me, making me believe in a version of him that didn't exist. I wasn't sure I could ever trust him again. I spent more time reflecting, weighing the options before me. I loved him, but could love overcome the betrayal? He had hidden such a huge part of himself from me. Could I accept that? I thought back to our vows, to the promises we made to each other, in sickness and health, for better or worse. But this wasn't a little mistake. It was a fundamental lie that had altered everything. How could I trust someone who had been hiding his truth from me for so long? I began to question my own identity within this relationship. Who was I now that the foundation had been shaken? Had I been living in a fantasy? I started reflecting on everything, every moment of our relationship, and it all felt clouded by doubt. I wanted to believe in him again, but I couldn't erase the images of the man he had been pretending to be. I wasn't just angry, I was lost. The love I once felt seemed overshadowed by this enormous betrayal. He kept trying to reassure me, telling me that he was committed to making things right. But the more he talked, the more I felt like it was too late. Words were no longer enough. He could apologize all he wanted, but the damage had been done. It wasn't just about the lie anymore. It was about everything that had been built on it. Trust was broken, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. Every time I looked at him, all I saw was the man who had kept me in the dark. Our conversations grew quieter, more strained. We tiptoed around the issue, not wanting to bring it up, but the elephant in the room grew larger every day. I couldn't pretend it wasn't there, and neither could he. Our once warm, loving home felt cold, like a place where something had died. I missed the connection we used to have, but I wasn't sure how to get it back. The love I had for him now felt tangled with doubt, and I wasn't sure if it was enough to move forward. One evening, I was cleaning out the closet when I found something else, a photograph. It was old, worn at the edges, and it showed him with another woman, much younger, at a party. The date on the back was years before we had met. But what stood out to me was her age. She was the same age I was when I met him. My heart dropped. What had I been missing all this time? Was I just another chapter in his long history of deception? The realization hit hard. I confronted him about the photo. His face went pale as he tried to explain, but his words felt empty. It was a long time ago, he said, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. The photo wasn't just a reminder of his past. It was a symbol of everything that had been hidden from me. His entire life had been a carefully curated lie, and I had been nothing more than a part of it. I didn't know who he truly was anymore. I felt like I was losing myself in the process. I could feel the walls closing in around me. Everything about our life together felt like it had been built on false pretenses. I was suffocating in the uncertainty. The man I had married seemed like a stranger now, and all the memories I cherished felt tainted. I kept questioning whether I had ever really known him at all. Could I ever trust him again? Could we rebuild what we once had, or was it too broken to fix? One night, as we sat in silence, he said something that stuck with me. I never wanted to hurt you. It sounded so sincere, but it didn't change the fact that he had. He had hidden his age, his past, and everything in between. If he truly cared about me, why had he kept those secrets? The truth wasn't just about numbers or years. It was about the trust he had betrayed. Could I move past this and give him a second chance, or was I only fooling myself? I began to feel a heavy weight of indecision. Part of me still loved him, still wanted to believe that we could move forward. But the other part of me screamed that I deserved more. More than a man who had lied about something so fundamental. More than a relationship based on illusions. I wondered if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving, but then I realized I had to protect myself. I couldn't keep living in a relationship where my trust was always in question. The days dragged on, and I found myself emotionally exhausted. Every conversation felt like a tug of war between my heart and my mind. One minute, I wanted to forgive him, to give us a chance to heal. The next, I was consumed with anger and betrayal. I needed clarity, but it felt impossible to find. Each time I looked at him, the question lingered. Could I ever trust him again? The pain of his lies was so deep, it seemed like the scar would never heal. Finally, I reached a breaking point. I realized that I needed to stop living in the shadows of his lies. It wasn't about age anymore. It was about my own worth. I deserved to be with someone who was honest, who wouldn't hide parts of himself from me. I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for the sake of a love that felt more like a lie. So, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I walked away. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to find myself again, without him. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.